Shema Yisrael are the first two words of a section of the Torah, and is the title of a prayer that serves as a centerpiece of the morning and evening Jewish prayer services. The first verse encapsulates the monotheistic essence of Judaism. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, found in Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 4, sometime alternately translated as, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. Observant Jews consider the Shema to be the most important part of the prayer service in Judaism, and its twice-daily recitation as a mitzvah. It is traditional for Jews to say the Shema as their last words, and for parents to teach their children to say it before they go to sleep at night. The term Shema is used by extension to refer to the whole part of the daily prayers that commences with Shema Yisrael and comprises Deuteronomy 6-4-9, 11-13-21, and Numbers chapter 15 verses 37-41. These sections of the Torah read in the weekly Torah portions V'et Chanan, Akev, and Shlach, respectively. History. Originally, the Shema consisted of only one verse, Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 4. The recitation of the Shema in the liturgy, however, consists of three portions. Deuteronomy chapter 6 verses 4-9, 11, 13-21, and Numbers chapter 15 verses 37-41. The three portions are already mentioned in the Mishnah. The three portions relate to central issues of Jewish belief. In the Mishnah, the reciting of the Shema was linked with reaffirming a personal relationship with God's rule. Literally, reciting the Shema was stated as receiving the kingdom of heaven. Heaven is a metaphor for God. The best texts of the Mishnah, Kaufman and Palmer, do not have the addition joke that is found in later printed Mishnahs. Receive the joke of the kingdom of heaven. The original statement appears to have been, to receive the kingdom of heaven. Additionally, the Talmud points out that subtle references to the Ten Commandments can be found in the three portions. As the Ten Commandments were removed from daily prayer in the Mishnah each period, the Shema is seen as an opportunity to commemorate the Ten Commandments. There are two larger print letters in the first sentence which, when combined, spell. In Hebrew this means witness. The idea thus conveyed is that through the recitation or proclamation of the Shema, one is a living witness testifying to the truth of its message. Modern Kabbalistic schools, namely that of the Ari, teach that when one recites the last letter of the word Echad, meaning one, he is to intend that he is ready to die into God. Content. Shema Yisrael. The first pivotal words of the Shema are Hebrew. Shema Yisrael YHWH Eloheinu YHWH Ehad. Rabbinic Judaism teaches that the Tetragrammaton YHWH is the ineffable and actual name of God, and as such is not read aloud in the Shema but is traditionally replaced with Adonai. For this reason, the Shema is recited aloud as Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Ehad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. The literal word meanings are roughly as follows. Shema, listen, or hear, and do Yisrael, Israel, in the sense of the people or congregation of Israel. Adonai, often translated as Lord. It is read in place of YHWH. Samaritans say Shema, which is Aramaic for the divine name, and is the exact equivalent of the Hebrew Hashem, which Rabbinic Jews substitute for Adonai, in a non-liturgical context such as everyday speech. Eloheinu, the plural first-person possessive of Elohim, meaning our God. Echad, the unified and cardinal number one. Another possibility is the Samaritan reading, Shema Yisrael, Shema Eloheinu, Shema Ehad. The connective is implied rather than stated as it would be in modern English. This first verse of the Shema relates to the kingship of God. The first verse, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, has ever been regarded as the confession of belief in the one God. Due to the ambiguities of the Hebrew language, there are multiple ways of translating the Shema. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God. Adonai is one, and, hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai alone. Many commentaries have been written about the subtle differences between the translations. There is an emphasis on the oneness of God and on the sole worship of God by Israel. There are other translations, though most retain one or the other emphases. Baruch Shem, blessed be the name of his glorious kingdom forever and ever. The second line is a rabbinic addition and is recited silently during congregational worship. It was originally a liturgical response in use in the temple when the name of God was pronounced and took the form of Baruch Shem Kavod Olam. Blessed be his glorious name. However, in time the words Malchuto and Vaed were added. Malchuto was introduced by the rabbis during Roman rule as a counter to the claim of divine honors by Roman emperors. Vaed was introduced at the time of the Second Temple to contrast the view of the minim that there is no life after death. V'ahavta. The following verses are commonly referred to as the V'ahavta according to the first word of the verse immediately following the Shema, or in classical Hebrew Wahavta, meaning, and you shall love. They contain the command to love God with all one's heart, soul, and might. The Talmud emphasizes that you will, at some point, whether you choose to or not, and therefore uses shall, future tense, love God. Then verse 7 goes on to remind the community to remember all the commandments and to teach them diligently to your children and speak of them when you sit down and when you walk, when you lie down and when you rise, to recite the words of God when retiring or rising, to bind those words on thy arm and thy head, and to inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. V'hayam Shamoa. The passage following the Shema and V'ahavta relates to the issue of reward and punishment. It contains the promise of reward for serving God with all one's heart, soul, and might and for the fulfillment of the laws. It also contains punishment for transgression. It also contains a repetition of the contents of the first portion, but this time spoken to the second person plural. Vayoma. The third portion relates to the issue of redemption. Specifically, it contains the law concerning the zitzite as a reminder that all laws of God are obeyed, as a warning against following evil inclinations and in remembrance of the exodus from Egypt. For the prophets and rabbis, the exodus from Egypt is paradigmatic of Jewish faith that God redeems from all forms of foreign domination. It can be found in the portion Shleish Lecha in the Book of Numbers. Summary. In summary, the content flows from the assertion of the oneness of God's kingship. Thus, in the first portion, there is a command to love God with all one's heart, soul and might, and to remember and teach these very important words to the children throughout the day. Obeying these commands, says the second portion, will lead to rewards, and disobeying them will lead to punishment. To ensure fulfillment of these key commands, God also commands in the third portion a practical reminder, wearing the zitzite, that ye may remember and do all my commandments, and be holy unto your God. The full content verse by verse, in Hebrew, English transliteration and English translation, can be found here. The second line quoted, "Blessed be the name of his glorious kingdom forever and ever," was originally a congregational response to the declaration of the oneness of God. It is therefore often printed in small font and recited in an undertone, as recognition that it is not, itself, a part of the cited biblical verses. The third section of the Shema formally ends at Numbers chapter 15 verse 41. But in fact traditionally Jews end the recitation of the Shema with the following word from the next verse, emet, or truth, as the end of the prayer, recitation and reading. The Torah states that these words be spoken of when you lie down, and when you rise up. Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 7. The first book of the Talmud, Tractate Brakot, opens with a discussion of when exactly the Shema needs to be recited. The Mishnah connects the time of recitation with details of the rhythm of the life of the temple in Jerusalem, saying that the Shema should be recited in the evening when the Kohanim who were tamei enter to eat their terumah. The Gemara contains a wide-ranging discussion of exactly when this occurred, with general agreement that it occurred in the evening, either after sunset or after 3 stars were visible. A similar discussion describes the morning Shema, which can be recited at first light prior to sunrise, as soon as colors can be discerned. The Shema does not have to be recited in Hebrew. It may be recited in any language the worshipper understands, but the miracle of the Hebrew letters makes the prayer much more powerful in Hebrew even if you don't understand the words. It is an almost universal custom among observant Jews to recite it in Hebrew. In Orthodox and Conservative Judaism, the Shema should be recited twice daily, whether or not one is able to attend services with a congregation. The recitation should be performed in a suitable place that expresses reverence. The Shema, or as much of the first verse of it as can be said under the circumstances, is traditionally recited by a dying person as a part of an affirmation of faith upon death. It is also recited near the end of Nila service on Yom Kippur. Women and the Shema. In Orthodox Judaism, women are not required to recite the Shema, as with other time-bound requirements which might impinge on their traditional familial obligations. Although they are obligated to pray at least once daily without a specific liturgy requirement, and many fulfill that obligation through prayers like the Shema. However, the practice among all Jews, women, men, and children, is to recite it. The Mishnah suggests that the time for recitation should not be more than 3rd hour, but if it is after that time, it should still be read, since it contains expressions of the unity of God, belief in a creator, etc. It is incumbent to teach children to recite the first verse, and subsequent paragraphs as soon as they are able to understand its meaning. Women are not time-bound in its recitation and therefore are not required to say it within its time. Conservative Judaism generally regards Jewish women as being obligated to recite the Shema at the same times as men. Reform and Reconstructionist Judaism do not regard gender-related traditional Jewish ritual requirements as necessary in modern circumstances, including obligations for men but not women to pray specific prayers at specific times. Instead, both genders may fulfill all requirements. Accompanying blessings. The benedictions preceding and following the Shema are traditionally credited to the members of the Great Assembly. They were first instituted in the liturgy of the temple in Jerusalem. According to the Talmud, the reading of the Shema morning and evening fulfills the commandment, "You shall meditate therein day and night." As soon as a child begins to speak, his father is directed to teach him the verse, "Moses commanded us a law, even the inheritance of the congregation of Jacob," and teach him to read the Shema. The reciting of the first verse of the Shema is called the acceptance of the yoke of the kingship of God. Judah ha-Nasi, who spent all day involved with his studies and teaching, said just the first verse of the Shema in the morning, as he passed his hands over his eyes, which appears to be the origin of the Jewish custom to cover the eyes with the right hand whilst reciting the first verse. The first verse of the Shema is recited aloud, simultaneously by the Hazan and the congregation, which responds with the rabbinically instituted Baruch Shem in silence before continuing the rest of Shema. Only on Yom Kippur is this response said aloud. The remainder of the Shema is read in silence. Sephardim recite the whole of the Shema aloud, except the Baruch Shem. Reformed Jews also recite the whole of the first paragraph of the Shema aloud. Shatrit. During Shatrit, there are 2 blessings before the Shema and 1 thereafter. These numbers, 2 before and 1 after, are based on the Mishnah Tractate Brachos, chapter 11, which states, "In the morning one blesses 2 before and 1 after," though there is a question in Jewish law as to whether one recites these blessings on the Shema or surrounding the Shema. The conclusion that has been drawn is that they are to be blessings surrounding the Shema, because the structure is similar to that of blessings of the Torah, and there is doubt as to whether such blessings would actually enhance the Shema. The two blessings that are recited before the Shema are Yotzer or an Ahava Rabbah. The blessing after is known as Emet Vayatziv. Mariv. During Mariv, there are two blessings before the Shema and three after. The two before are Hamar Erev Aravim and Ahavat Olim. The three after are Emet V'Emunah, Hashkai V'nu, and Baruch Hashem Lolim, though the latter is not recited on Shabbat or Yom Tov. Bedtime Shema. Before going to sleep, the first paragraph of the Shema is recited. Some also have the custom to read all three paragraphs, along with a whole list of sections from Psalms, Takanan, and other prayers. Altogether this is known as the Kriyat Shema She'al Har-Mita. According to Arizal, reading this prayer with great concentration is also effective in cleansing one from sin. This is discussed in the Tanya. Other instances. The exhortation by the Kohen in calling Israel to arms against an enemy also includes Shema Yisrael. Rabbi Akiva patiently endured while his flesh was being torn with iron combs, and died reciting the Shema. He pronounced the last word of the sentence, Ehad, with his last breath. Since then, it has been traditional for Jews to say the Shema as their last words. Wa Klein, a major in the IDF, said the Shema before jumping on a live grenade to save his fellow soldiers. In accordance with the traditional Jewish practice of reciting the Shema when one believes one is going to die, music Arnold Schoenberg used it as part of the story to his narrative orchestral work A Survivor from Warsaw. In Parade, a musical based on true events, the main character Leah Frank, wrongly accused of the murder of a child worker at the pencil factory he manages, recites the Shema Yisrael as a vigilante gang kidnap and hang him in the final scenes of the work. Pop versions have been published by Mordecai Ben David and Sarat Haddad. In Pi, Max Cohen and Lenny Meyer can be seen reciting the first three verses of the Shema. In The Shoes of the Fisherman, Anthony Quinn, as the fictional Pope Kira, explores the backstreets of Rome disguised as a simple priest, and recites the Shema at the bedside of a dying Roman Jew. Reggae singer Matisyahu recites the Shema in his songs, Got No Water, and Tel Aviv N. Yaakov Shweki in his Shema Yisrael used the story of Rabbi Eliezer Silver's saving Jewish children hidden in Christian monasteries following the Holocaust by reciting the first line of the Shema. Singer Justin Bieber says the Shema before each public performance with his manager Scooter Braun, who is Jewish.